high above the city, where the land begins to rise and the air grows quieter, there stands a home that feels deeply connected to the ground beneath it. This is Tahanan, the home of designer and craftsman Benji Reyes, but this is not the kind of house that announces itself loudly. It does not rely on size, spectacle, or excess. Instead, it speaks through restraint, through material, through memory, and through a rare kind of design honesty that allows the house to feel less like an object placed on the land, and more like something that naturally belongs there. From the very beginning, Tahanan suggests a different way of thinking about architecture. It is not trying to overpower the site. It is not trying to reshape the land into something easier or more convenient. Instead, it accepts the land as it is. And that decision changes everything. The house sits on a steep slope in Antipolo, descending toward a stream below. It is the kind of terrain that many would consider difficult. Steep land can be challenging to build on. It can be complicated, expensive, and restrictive. But in this case, the slope becomes one of the most important parts of the design. Rather than resisting it, the architecture responds to it. The house steps down with the terrain. It follows the natural fall of the ground. And as a result, every level of the home feels like part of a carefully composed journey. This is not a house you simply enter. It is a house you move through, a house that unfolds gradually, a house that reveals itself in layers. The arrival experience begins with subtlety. There is no overwhelming front statement, no grand gesture meant to impress from a distance. The approach is quiet, measured, almost humble, and that humility is important because it immediately sets the tone for everything that follows. The entrance prepares the visitor to slow down, to pay attention, to notice material texture, shadow, light, and sound. A wooden walkway leads inward. Beneath it, water flows gently through a koi pond. Around it, plants soften the edges of the built form. The transition is gentle but powerful. It creates a moment of pause, a small crossing from the outer world into the inner world of the house. And that moment matters, because Tahanan is not only about shelter. It is about atmosphere. It is about emotional experience. It is about creating a place where the pace of life naturally changes. As the visitor moves deeper into the home, the architecture begins to reveal the mindset of its maker. Benji Reyes is a craftsman, a designer deeply rooted in woodwork, and that identity is everywhere in the house. This is not a home that uses materials carelessly. Every element feels chosen with intention. Every surface feels considered. Every joinery detail suggests patience, skill, and a respect for how things are made. Wood is the central language of the house, not as decoration, but as structure, warmth, and memory. Some of the materials used in the home come from reclaimed sources: old wood, timbers from earlier structures, pieces with history already embedded in them. That decision gives the house a special depth. It means the home is not beginning from zero. It is continuing a story carried through older materials that have been given new life. In that sense, Tahanan does not erase the past. It preserves it, it reuses it, it honors it. And that gives the architecture a feeling of continuity that is often missing in more modern homes. There is something deeply human about that choice. It says that beauty does not always need to come from something new. Sometimes beauty comes from remembering. Sometimes it comes from reworking what already exists. Sometimes it comes from allowing materials to live a second life in a new context. Inside, the house opens into spaces that feel calm, generous, and deeply connected to the surroundings. The interiors do not feel isolated from nature. They feel shaped by it. Light enters softly. Air moves freely. And the boundaries between inside and outside begin to weaken. That is one of the strongest qualities of the home. It does not separate the occupants from the landscape. It allows them to remain in conversation with it. The sound of the stream below becomes part of the atmosphere. The greenery outside remains visible from within. The changing light throughout the day becomes part of the interior experience. Everything feels alive. Everything feels responsive. And because of that, the home never feels static. It feels inhabited by nature as much as by people. The spatial planning of the house also reflects this philosophy. The home is layered vertically because of the steep terrain. That means the journey through the house is not flat or predictable. It rises, it descends, it shifts perspective, and with each movement, the visitor sees the house differently. One moment the space feels open and expansive. The next moment it feels intimate and enclosed. Then suddenly it opens again toward a new view. This constant variation gives the home a strong sense of rhythm. It makes the architecture feel dynamic without becoming dramatic for the sake of drama. The movement is natural, unforced, and carefully controlled. Among the most memorable parts of the house are the handcrafted details. These details are not small in significance. They are central to the spirit of the home. The staircase, for example, is more than a way to move between levels. It is a sculptural presence within the interior. It carries the same care and precision that define the rest of the house. The balustrade's edges and transitions all show a level of craftsmanship that reveals the hand of the maker. Nothing feels generic. Nothing feels mass-produced. Instead, the house carries the unmistakable presence of someone who understands wood not only as a building material, but as a medium of expression. That distinction matters, because in Tahanan, construction is not separated from artistry. The two are joined. The structure is beautiful because it is built with artistic intelligence, and the art is grounded because it is held by structure. That balance gives the home its depth. It prevents it from becoming either overly decorative or overly minimal. It remains warm, tactile, and human. Another defining feature of the house is the way it manages openness. There are spaces that feel wide and flowing. There are others that feel tucked away and private. But even in the more enclosed areas, the house never feels cut off from the world around it. There is always a sense of connection, a framed view, a shaft of light, a breeze, a glimpse of greenery, a sound from outside. These small details maintain the house's relationship with the land. They remind the visitor that the architecture is not the main character. The landscape is, and the house is there to support that relationship, not compete with it. That idea becomes even clearer when considering how the home was built. Constructing on a steep site requires patience and precision. It requires a sensitivity to levels, foundations, movement, and flow. But in Tahanan, the challenge seems to have been embraced rather than minimized. The result is a house that feels fully integrated into its setting. It sits with the land, not above it, not against it, with it. That may be one of the most important lessons the house offers. True architecture does not always impose itself. Sometimes it listens, sometimes it adapts, sometimes it steps back so that the landscape can remain visible, present, and powerful. This home does exactly that. It becomes a frame for the natural world, a quiet vessel for light and air, a crafted environment where daily life can unfold in harmony with the slope, the stream, and the vegetation around it. And yet the house is not only an exercise in design, it is also a personal expression, a reflection of Benji Reyes himself. His values are embedded in the architecture. His discipline, his love of craft, his appreciation for materials with character, his ability to see value in what already exists, his respect for the handmade, all of that becomes visible in the home. Tahanan is in many ways a portrait, not a literal one, but a spatial one. It tells the story of a person through form, texture, and proportion. It reveals a life devoted to making, a life shaped by care, and a life that understands that a home should be more than a container for living. It should be an extension of character. As the video continues, the home begins to feel less like a finished product and more like a living system. Plants are allowed to grow into the edges of the architecture. Natural elements remain visible everywhere. The house does not fight the environment, it coexists with it. And that coexistence gives the entire place a sense of calm dignity. There is no sense of harshness here, no sense of competition, no sense that one thing is trying to dominate another. Everything seems to be in balance. The wood, the water, the slope, the air, the vegetation, and the hand of the maker all come together in a single composition. That composition is what makes the house memorable, not just the beauty of the details, but the clarity of the philosophy behind them. This is a home that values continuity over interruption, quiet over noise, craft over display, and harmony over control. It is easy to imagine how different this place would feel if any of those principles were missing. if the slope had been flattened, if the materials had been standardized, if the views had been closed off, if the house had tried to become an isolated object instead of a responsive environment. But it does none of those things. Instead, it remains faithful to the land and to the person who built it. That faithfulness is what gives Tahanan its emotional strength. It feels honest, it feels grounded, it feels lived in, and it feels complete not because it is perfect, but because it is true to its purpose. There is also a quiet emotional quality to the home that becomes stronger the longer it is observed. It does not demand attention, it earns it. It does not overwhelm, it settles. It does not shout its identity, it reveals it slowly. That slowness is part of its charm, part of its power, and part of what makes the house feel so deeply human. In a world where many buildings are designed to impress first and serve second, Tahanan does the opposite. It serves first, it shelters, it breathes, it listens. And through that quiet generosity, it becomes something far more meaningful than a showcase of design. It becomes a place of belonging, a place of thought, a place where architecture, craft, and landscape are allowed to exist together without conflict. By the end of the video, the home stands as a powerful reminder of what can happen when a designer trusts the land, respects the material, and follows the logic of nature instead of forcing against it. Tahanan is not just a house on a hillside. It is an expression of a way of living, a way of building, a way of seeing, and in that sense, it is more than architecture. It is a philosophy made visible, a crafted stillness, a layered refuge, a home where the hand of the maker is present in every detail, and where the landscape remains the true source of beauty. In the end, Tahanan leaves the impression of a place that was never meant to impress from afar. It was meant to be experienced closely, slowly, thoughtfully, and with a full awareness of the quiet connection between people, material, and the natural world. That is what gives the house its lasting presence. That is what makes it memorable. And that is why it feels not only like a home, but like a complete and deeply personal work of art.